Earlier this week, the Democrats decided to take a look back at what the heck went wrong for the 2024 election, and the results highlighted everything that went wrong. But guess what? They didn't propose any solutions. So how will the party adapt for the next election? Well, let's bring in Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford, because he wrote about this in his latest Beltway brief. So Bedford, what did they uncover this time around when they actually took a long, hard look in the mirror?
They had some of their top data scientists at one of their outside firms take a look, led by David Shore, who you might have seen his interviews over the last week as they got ready to release this report. And they interviewed over 8 million people, multiple times per person, and they came to the conclusion that things were even more dire than Democrats had hoped. Now, we'd heard this kind of coping from Democrats that the problem is their voters just stayed in the couch. But that's not the problem. The problem is that between 2016 and 2024, for example, moderate Hispanics who self-identify as moderate, swung 24 points towards the Republicans. The numbers were high for liberal Hispanics who qualified as liberal, called themselves liberal as well. Amongst Black voters, the numbers weren't that high, but they were the first really noticeable shift that Democrats have had to deal with since in modern times, essentially. This is a reckoning. And previously, there's been a couple things that Democrats have always, and Republicans, have taken for granted, which is that the more people you register, the better Democrats do. You got to get those voters who aren't typically politically engaged, and they'll vote for the liberal candidate if you can get them to the polls. Now, we heard rumors during the 2024 election that Democrats were starting to pull back from this strategy because they were finding out that they were registering more people than they expected to vote for Donald Trump than Kamala Harris. And it looks like, according to David Shore, that if everyone in this country had voted, if they just actually done what they always talked about, a universal registration, then Donald Trump would have won the national vote by 5 points. It would have made it worse for Democrats. So the strategies that they have pursued in the past, especially in the last 12 years or so, just aren't working. In fact, they're hindering and hurting Democrats. Now, there's a lot of information there about where they're going wrong, the different things that they have been pushing and preaching, and how they're not actually having any real good impact with the voters that they expect. But they're not reacting to it that way. I mean, some of the folks, the more intelligent folks maybe, like Chuck Schumer, are out there now just trying on a mea culpa tour, trying to say, I'm so sorry, look at my progressive bona fides, look how much I'm actually willing to fight on this sort of thing. Some of the other ones, like Gavin Newsom and Shapiro and Fetterman, are trying to tack more to the center. But by far, the loudest voices in the room are the AOCs, the Bernie Sanders, who are going out in these rallies, doubling and tripling down on the different policies that, well, we saw this swing over the last couple of years. Now, you got to keep in mind, they always try to act like they're in the opposition, these progressives. But they've essentially been in charge since 2008 with the 4-year blip of Donald Trump. They had 12 years in the White House to prove their mettle, and the American people have thoroughly rejected what they've said. The corporations have rejected what they're saying. The tech companies have rejected what they're saying. So when you look at these charts, the number one takeaway is, listen, guys, if you're a Democrat, I have to grow the slice of our pie. Our slice of the electoral pie is the most politically engaged across the entire country. The people who care the most about politics vote for us. But we've already got them. They're already coming out and voting. And now you got these progressives out there, as opposed to trying to grow that pie, they're just trying to shove more sugar into their little narrow slice to completely overload it, give it diabetes. And that's not a strategy that's actually going to see them out of the wilderness anytime soon.
It is unbelievable to me that there is another group that was completely wrong this entire time about how to actually win and defeat the Democrats. And that is the Republicans, who were the experts who told us how to win for many years and failed for years. And it took Donald J. Trump to do this. And now we see this definitive win. But I want to talk about some of those people in charge. I want to talk about those progressives. I want to talk about a certain representative who is beyond retarded. A certain representative who is near and dear to everyone's hearts. A certain representative who is really making waves with her clownish performances, and that is someone who conservative media right now can't stay away from for good reason. Representative Jasmine Crockett, who is under fire for saying that Senator Ted Cruz, quote, has to be knocked over the head like hard.
I think that you punch. I think you punch. I think you're okay with you okay with punching. You know, I think, and I love Colin, and I think towards the end he started to punch a little harder. But like, it's Ted Cruz. I mean, like, this dude has to be knocked over the head like hard, right? Like, there is no niceties with him, like at all. Like you go clean off on him, right?
Chris, at the risk of destroying your brain cells and mine, please comment on that video.
It's truly incredible. And she is someone who has absolutely glommed at the camera with a message that I don't know exactly who is that appealing to, other than people who maybe are already entirely in agreement with her. I actually think it's funny. I think it's great. I mean, if you see other clips from that same interview, they asked her, well, what legislation do you have pending? What are you trying to work on? And she said she has no legislation pending. She has nothing that she's trying to work on. Quote, I'm not gonna lie.
That's preferred. That's preferred. I'm not going to lie. That's preferred.
And she says, well, what chances does it have of success? Well, okay, I get it. But your job is to be there to legislate, not to be just a TikTok influencer who talks smack from the interview chair about beating up Ted Cruz. It doesn't make any sense. It's deeply stupid. And I feel like you're totally right, Matt. I've been assigning an article about her probably once a day because she is on an absolute media blitz. So if you're someone who's actually interested in trying to change the way the party's fortunes have been going, if you're a Democrat who's actually interested in trying to shift the focus of the party back to the roots that made it dominant force of the 20th century in American politics, well, you're sitting there thinking, I can't get any air. These people are taking over. These different progressive politicians are sucking all of the air out of the room. It kind of reminds me of in 2016 on the campaign trail, all these Republicans are out there and they had their talking points and they never pointed at you. They always just used their thumb because that's what the focus group said was non-threatening when they were trying to make a point. And they would go out and give the same speech over and over again. And they couldn't understand why they were getting zero coverage. And then Donald Trump would go out there and he'd say something new every single time. He'd say something that the liberals thought was stupid. He'd say things that the Republicans thought were stupid. But he said things that the base was actually interested in. That was a totally different strategy. He sucked the oxygen out of the room for those Republicans. Unfortunately for the Democrats, the people who are taking up all the oxygen have nothing smart to say.
Bedford, in the last 60 seconds that we have you, because you are our politics editor, we ask everybody coming up next, by the way, how to improve Congress. So I want to get your suggestions since you're there on Capitol Hill and have to deal with this all the time.
Oh, there's a couple different ways. Well, I mean, one of the biggest problems with Congress right now is a problem that America is dealing with in general, and you can't really fix it. It's just the mass media. The stuff that we're doing right now, the internet, the constant news cycle, it makes it so that they're always in a fundraising pitch. They're not actually interested in governing. I think one of the ways that you actually have to do that is to increase the talent pool. This is not always popular to hear in conservative circles, but I think they need to raise the salaries of the staff. They need to get more experienced people in there. They need to get people who are actually willing to do battle, people who don't stay there until their late 20s, early 30s, and then change out and get a big job with a lot more money. People who are interested in coming to D.C. to actually make an impact. I mean, heck, I would personally love it if you could make their terms just a little bit longer so congressmen aren't always constantly in this dumb fundraising cycle with zero interest in governance, and have a staff behind them that's more than just grok and a couple people who answer the phones, who know the systems of this government, know the ideas of the congressman, congresswoman, and want to push it through. And obviously for the Senate, well, bring back state appointments.